The front door clicked open at exactly 4:07 in the morning, carrying the heavy stench of expensive whiskey and cheap cologne. When I calmly asked my wife where she had been, Simone leaned casually against the doorframe, flashed a slow, smug smile, and whispered that I shouldn't ask questions. I rolled over and let her fall asleep, believing she had completely outsmarted me. But less than 6 hours later, when she strolled down the stairs and walked into our sunlit living room, that smugness evaporated in a single, devastating instant. Sitting silently in my favorite armchair was a man she didn't know, and standing right beside him, weeping uncontrollably, was her own mother. Simone didn't scream or argue. Her knees buckled, sending her collapsing onto the hardwood floor. That brutal realization was merely the opening act of the absolute worst day of her entire existence. To truly appreciate the bitter irony of my situation, you need to understand who I am. For nearly 2 decades, I have been a licensed family therapist, charging people to dissect their failing marriages. I built a successful career teaching desperate people how to spot the microscopic fractures in a relationship before the foundation caves in. Yet, the universe decided to play the ultimate joke on me. I spent 20 years training others to read the behavioral signatures of a cheating spouse, only to be hopelessly blind to the massive red flags waving inside my own home. I met Simone 14 years ago at a professional conference in Memphis. She was an ambitious pharmaceutical sales representative with a razor-sharp wit. We married quickly, settling into a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood. While we never had children, we built a fulfilling life, anchored by our advancing careers. Her mother, Dolores, lived just 20 minutes away and became a beloved fixture in our weekly routine, treating me like her own son. I honestly thought I possessed an unbreakable bond with a wife who deeply loved me and a mother-in-law who trusted me unconditionally. The subtle decay of my marriage began roughly 8 months before that agonizing confrontation. Simone, now a prominent director at a major pharmaceutical company, suddenly had an overwhelming number of late-night work calls. I would find her standing in the dark garage, whispering into her phone, effortlessly blaming difficult clients. Then came the exorbitant boutique gym membership, an entirely new wardrobe, and fabricated weekend getaways, a supposed girls' trip to Charleston, a corporate retreat in Atlanta, a spa weekend with a cousin she barely knew. Each isolated lie was a tiny, digestible pill I willingly swallowed. My willful ignorance finally shattered on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in late September. Arriving home early, I found the house empty, but her work laptop was glowing on the kitchen island. I walked past it when a bright notification pinged from an encrypted messaging app. The preview text burned itself into my retinas instantly. "Can't wait for Thursday. Same room as last time." I stood frozen in the middle of my kitchen, feeling 14 years of history disintegrate in a fraction of a second. I walked into my study, sat in the dark for 2 solid hours, and allowed the horrifying reality to wash over me. 19 years of watching furious spouses destroy their own leverage taught me the vital importance of restraint. Instead of confronting Simone with unbridled rage, I chose cold, calculated silence. For 6 grueling weeks, I transformed into a phantom investigator inside my own home. The final puzzle piece fell into place when I intercepted a credit card statement containing a steep charge for a luxury downtown boutique hotel. Simone had explicitly told me she spent that particular Thursday nursing her sick mother back to health. When I casually called Dolores to check on her, my mother-in-law was completely baffled. Simone was actively using her own mother as an unwitting pawn in her disgusting charade. Knowing I needed irrefutable proof, I hired a retired police detective turned private investigator named Wade. 3 agonizing weeks later, Wade handed me a thick manila folder documenting their hidden world with excruciating clarity. My wife was sleeping with a 42-year-old regional sales director named Desmond Farrow, a high-level executive at a competing pharmaceutical firm. Wade's time-stamped photographs showed them strolling into luxury hotels hand in hand, verifying an affair that had been flourishing for nearly a year. But as I flipped toward the back of the investigator's report, a seemingly minor background detail twisted this already tragic story into a deeply disturbing psychological thriller. Wade's routine background checks accidentally unearthed a parallel secret that defied all logic. My mother-in-law, Dolores, had quietly started dating a widower from her church 6 months prior. Because she was embarrassed about finding romance so late in life, Dolores hadn't breathed a word of this relationship to Simone. The man's name was Harold, and as I stared at his family tree in the file, my blood ran ice cold. Harold was Desmond Farrow's father. My wife was passionately carrying on a covert affair with the son of the man her mother had secretly fallen in love with. 2 clandestine relationships operating in the exact same orbit, completely oblivious to each other's existence. What the investigator unearthed next transformed my personal heartbreak into a full-scale corporate catastrophe. Desmond was a heavily documented corporate predator. He had a pattern of targeting powerful, married female executives at rival pharmaceutical companies to extract highly confidential trade secrets. By cross-referencing Desmond's digital footprint with Simone's corporate activity, Wade discovered that Simone's own company was already conducting a covert internal investigation into massive data leaks originating directly from her secure credentials. Desmond was methodically draining her professional knowledge to advance his own career. She had gambled her marriage, her reputation, and her professional livelihood for a man who viewed her as a disposable asset. Armed with this devastating arsenal of truth, I drove to Dolores's house and laid the gruesome reality out on her kitchen table. It was Dolores, fueled by the betrayal of being used as a fake alibi, who demanded the family be present. She immediately called Harold, who was so violently disgusted by his son's predatory behavior that he insisted on being there to look the coward in the eye. We even brought in Simone's sister, Paulette, to ensure there were no empty corners in the room for Simone to hide her lies. We meticulously engineered a trap designed to strip away every single illusion my wife had constructed. The trap was set for a Friday morning, immediately following Simone's predictable Thursday night hotel rendezvous with Desmond. I lay motionless in the dark that night, until I heard her key scrape in the lock at precisely 4:07. By 8 o'clock the next morning, the jury had quietly assembled in my home. Dolores looked pale but fiercely resolute. Harold carried the agonizing shame of a father forced to answer for his son's monstrous behavior. Paulette sat tense and confused. I positioned Harold in my armchair, the absolute first thing Simone would see. Dolores stood fiercely by his side like a sentry, while I served as the calm, terrifying usher to her doom. At 9:15, Simone's footsteps on the stairs were light, the casual strides of a woman wholly convinced she owned the world. She strolled toward the living room entrance, and I stood frozen, watching her psychological collapse unfold in real time. Her eyes hit Paulette first, registering mild annoyance. Then they darted to her mother, deepening into profound confusion. And finally, her gaze locked onto Harold. Because she had never met him, Simone simply stared at the strange, older man sitting in her husband's chair. But then Harold shattered the silence, with a voice trembling with decades of parental disappointment. He calmly introduced himself as Desmond's father. All the color violently drained from Simone's skin as her jaw dropped open in a silent, suffocating scream. Simone reflexively tried to stammer out a lie, but Dolores cut her off with a voice so sharp it could have sliced steel. Her mother ruthlessly dismantled every excuse, laying out the hotel receipts, the fake alibis, and the horrifying reality that Simone was sleeping with her own mother's future stepson. Simone frantically spun toward me, desperately accusing me of staging an elaborate setup. That was the precise moment I delivered the fatal blow. I unleashed the corporate espionage. I coldly detailed how her lover was a serial predator who historically targeted female executives for proprietary data. I told her about her company's covert IT investigation into her credentials, the leaked pricing structures, and the stolen launch timelines. I watched the horrifying realization crash down on her that she was simply the latest gullible victim in a corporate heist. Her carefully manicured facade completely disintegrated. Her legs gave out, and she collapsed violently against the arm of the couch, weeping with a guttural, primal agony. She was a broken, terrified shell of a human being, realizing she had absolutely nothing left. As she sobbed uncontrollably on our living room floor, her mother kneeling silently beside her, I realized I felt absolutely no triumphant satisfaction. My elaborate quest for justice merely exposed the devastating wreckage of 14 wasted years. The aftermath was swift, silent, and incredibly brutal. I filed for divorce immediately, securing all my financial assets without a single objection. Within 3 months, her company formally uncovered the data breaches and terminated her, leaving her professional reputation entirely radioactive. Desmond was unceremoniously fired from his own firm, and Harold completely severed all ties with his toxic son. Some betrayals can't be fixed, and sometimes the only way to survive the fire is to let the entire house burn straight to the ground.